It happened so fast that many students didn't even notice at first. Mr. Bradley, a seasoned history teacher at Riverside High School, slammed his hand on Jamal's desk, lips curling into a condescending smile, as he hissed, "I hope you're not expecting special treatment just because of that skin color." In that single sentence, he exposed the ugly side of a man who was supposed to enlighten young minds. Jamal Kendrick froze, feeling the sting of those words and the hush that fell over the classroom. It was only the second week of the new semester, and this was the first time he had ever been so blatantly humiliated by a teacher. But the seeds of tension had been there from day one. Even the moment Jamal first walked into Mr. Bradley's history class, he sensed something off, as though the teacher had cast an invisible spotlight on him, a black student who had just moved from out of state. Jamal tried to ignore that feeling, focusing on adjusting to a new school. Little did he know that this prejudice would escalate into a full-blown confrontation that would turn his world upside down. The rumors about Mr. Bradley had started circulating among students long before Jamal arrived. Some said he was just strict, a no-nonsense teacher who demanded the best from his pupils. Others whispered that there was something more sinister in his classroom manner, but no one dared to speak openly, for Mr. Bradley had a certain authority in his mid-50s, with graying hair, sharp blue eyes, and a crisp dress shirt. He carried himself like a disciplinarian from another era. He believed in order, hierarchy, and the idea that respect was to be demanded rather than earned. On Jamal's first day, he stood at the front of the class and said, "In this room, we don't do excuses. Do your work, follow the instructions, or be prepared for consequences." His gaze lingered on Jamal a fraction too long, as if anticipating he might be trouble. Jamal tried to dismiss this as nervousness, but from that instant, it was clear that Mr. Bradley had marked him. Week 1 passed with subtle jabs. Whenever Jamal raised his hand to volunteer an answer about the early settlers or the founding fathers, Mr. Bradley would ignore him in favor of calling on another student, often someone who was nodding off or flipping mindlessly through their notes. If Jamal persevered and kept his hand up, Mr. Bradley would sigh theatrically, roll his eyes, and then say, "Yes, Jamal? Keep it brief. We're short on time." On the surface, these remarks appeared like ordinary impatience, but there was an undercurrent of bitterness, as though Jamal's very presence offended him. One day, Mr. Bradley called Jamal out while distributing graded pop quizzes. "You can read, can't you? Then you should have known the answer to question 3, he said quietly, but loud enough for the nearby desks to hear. The question had been about the colony's agricultural economy, and Jamal had actually scored above average on the quiz, yet the teacher's tone suggested that Jamal's knowledge or intelligence was always in question. Behind Mr. Bradley's veneer of strictness lurked something far more alarming. He rarely gave explicit remarks about race, but the insinuations stabbed deeper than overt words. During a lesson on the Civil War, for instance, he launched into a lecture about how many groups in this country have tried to rewrite history to make themselves look like victims. Then he scanned the rows of students, eyes settling on Jamal for a beat. "We must base our understanding on pure facts, not on sob stories." Some students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Jamal forced himself to stare at his notebook, though his skin prickled with the weight of that gaze. He recognized the teacher's intention all too well. The other black students in the class averted their eyes, presumably afraid of drawing unwanted attention. Jamal was a bright kid who loved reading history on his own time. He lived with his mother, Mrs. Kendrick, who worked hard to provide stability after they relocated for her new job. Jamal's father was out of the picture, but his grandmother's stories had inspired his curiosity about the struggles and triumphs of African Americans. The civil rights movement, Reconstruction, slavery narratives, these subjects fascinated him. He admired historical figures who had stood up against racism. That's why it stung so deeply to face subtle hostility from someone entrusted with teaching him about that very history. He felt torn between wanting to speak out against injustice and fearing he'd make things worse for himself if he did. A small circle of classmates noticed these exchanges. Megan, a friendly, outgoing girl with blonde hair and an enthusiastic attitude, often exchanged worried glances with Jamal whenever Mr. Bradley's remarks veered into suspicious territory. Sarah, quieter but observant, also picked up on the tension. Tyler, a soft-spoken boy who sat at the back, rarely spoke in class but occasionally patted Jamal on the shoulder and murmured, "That's messed up, man," after Mr. Bradley made a nasty comment. The seeds of solidarity were there, though none of them yet fully grasped the scale of Mr. Bradley's prejudice. One day, Mr. Bradley announced a group project. "You'll be divided into teams of 4 or 5. Each team must do a presentation on a key aspect of the Civil War. You'll have 2 weeks." He rattled off the groups and assigned Jamal, Megan, Sarah, and Tyler together. When he called out their topic, the lives of enslaved people on southern plantations, he smirked. "That should be quite an interesting project for some of you," he said, eyes flicking to Jamal. A wave of discomfort rolled through the class. Megan frowned. Sarah whispered under her breath, "I can't believe him." They gathered after class to plan their project. Jamal had already done personal reading on the subject. He felt both excited to share what he knew and anxious about Mr. Bradley's likely reaction. Megan flipped through her notes. "We need to talk about daily life, forced labor, living conditions," she said. "And maybe we can highlight some first-person narratives," Sarah added. Jamal nodded. "I actually have a copy of Frederick Douglass's autobiography. We can quote from there." Tyler scrolled on his phone. "We could also show some old photos of plantations," he suggested. The group felt energized. This project was more than just an assignment. It was a chance to present historical truths Mr. Bradley seemed eager to dismiss or belittle. But from the outset, Mr. Bradley found fault. During a class work session, he glanced at their outline and snapped, "This is all very emotional, but where's the data? Did you just Google a couple of dramatic stories? Or do you have real sources?" Jamal took a deep breath and answered respectfully, "We cited historians, official records, diaries. It's in our bibliography." The teacher dismissed Jamal's explanation with a wave of his hand. "I see an awful lot of sentiment here. We're dealing with facts, not pity parties." Megan started to speak up, but Mr. Bradley cut her off. "I'm talking to Jamal. He's the one who keeps bringing these narratives to the forefront." After Mr. Bradley walked away, Megan and Sarah both let out a noise of exasperation. "You're doing nothing wrong," Megan insisted. "He's got an agenda." In the lunchroom, the rumor mill churned. Sarah quietly asked around about Mr. Bradley's history. Some older students recalled an incident from a previous year, a black student who'd filed a complaint about unfair treatment, but it never resulted in real consequences for the teacher. No one had evidence. An 11th grader shrugged. "And you know how it goes. Teacher has tenure. The student eventually moved away. Done deal." Jamal listened, his stomach in knots. He felt both anger and fear. What if history repeated itself, and no one believed him? Without proof, he'd just look like a troublemaker. Or worse, people might say he was playing the race card. The tension mounted. One afternoon, after the group had stayed late to work on their project in the library, Jamal emerged into the hallway alone. He spotted Mr. Bradley near the lockers, talking on his cell phone. He tried to slip by unnoticed, but a snippet of Mr. Bradley's conversation froze him. "No, I'm not coddling that kid. These people always want to cry discrimination whenever they can't keep up. I'm done with their excuses." Jamal stood there, heart pounding, struggling to process what he'd just heard. It felt like a confirmation of all his suspicions. He wanted to pull out his phone and record, but by the time he regained his composure, Mr. Bradley had hung up. Jamal hurried home, mind churning with questions. Should he tell the principal, Miss Green, about what he heard? What if Mr. Bradley denied it? He had no recording, no witness. That night, he confided in his mom. Miss S! Kendrick was furious and ready to storm into the school, but Jamal begged her to wait. He's careful with his words in front of others, Jamal reasoned. I need something solid, or they'll just take his side. She reluctantly agreed, but insisted, don't let him trample over you. We'll do whatever it takes to protect you. The group project's due date arrived. Jamal and his friends had prepared meticulously. A PowerPoint, quotes from enslaved people's narratives, data about plantation economies. They rehearsed, each playing a role. Jamal's job was to connect the personal stories to the broader historical context. When presentation day came, the entire class was riveted by the group's opening, a short video clip depicting life under slavery. Sarah provided a voiceover, reading a chilling excerpt describing whippings on the plantation. Megan presented statistics on how many enslaved individuals toiled across the South, their average life expectancy, the profits owners made. Tyler switched slides. Jamal took a breath and explained the daily reality of enslaved families torn apart. He tried to keep his voice steady. He was determined not to let fear of Mr. Bradley overshadow the brutal facts they'd uncovered. When they finished, some classmates clapped softly. Others sat in hushed attention. For a moment, Jamal felt proud. But Mr. Bradley sauntered to the front of the room, lips pressed tight. Well, that was dramatic, he said, eyes narrowing on Jamal. A lot of heartbreak on display, yes. But do you think slavery was the only issue behind the Civil War? Did you bother exploring the economic structures or states' rights? Or are we just using this platform to portray certain people as victims again? The words were like a slap. Megan jumped in. We absolutely covered the economic structures and states' rights, but Mr. Bradley silenced her with a glare. I'm asking Jamal, he growled. Jamal's cheeks flushed. He tried to remain calm. We did discuss economic factors like the demand for cotton, trade tariffs, and how the Southern economy depended on forced labor. Mr. Bradley waved a hand dismissively. I must have missed those details in your dramatic monologue. That evening, as the group met in the cafeteria after school, Sarah was livid. He ignores everything we say, then claims we didn't cover it. It's insane, Tyler frowned. He's making it personal. Did you hear him basically say, we only cared about making people feel sorry for slaves? That's just messed up, Megan huffed. We put in hours of research on those economic figures. It's in the slides. He's intentionally overlooking them. Jamal sat there in a numb haze. I don't know what to do, he admitted quietly. If I complain, I'm sure he'll find some way to retaliate. He's the teacher, and I'm just a student. Megan looked around. What if we collect evidence? Record him somehow? Sarah bit her lip. That could get us in trouble. But if we don't, no one will believe how bad it is. The man's a pro at making these jabs sound harmless when repeated. Jamal nodded, recalling the phone incident in the hallway. Maybe it was time to fight back, but it was risky. A few days later, fate served them an opportunity. Sarah, determined to do something, decided to keep her phone on voice memo during history class hidden in her bag or on her lap, out of sight. It was a covert operation, but they felt they had no choice. Sure enough, Mr. Bradley singled out Jamal during a review session for an upcoming exam. He said, loud enough for half the class to hear, Jamal, do you even understand these amendments we're covering? Or are you going to fall back on excuses like certain groups do, claiming the system is rigged against them? Several students went still as stone. Jamal's heart pounded. He mustered his courage and said, I'm studying just like everyone else, sir. Mr. Bradley gave a short, humorless laugh. We'll see about that. Sarah's phone captured every word. When the bell rang, her hands trembled as she ended the recording. Megan whispered, We got him. That afternoon they huddled in a discreet corner of the courtyard and played back the audio. The teacher's voice, dripping with condescension, was clear. The phrases certain groups and excuses left no doubt about his meaning. This is the smoking gun, Megan breathed. He can't hide behind plausible deniability now. Sarah and Jamal listened, hearts racing. They decided it was time to talk to Miss Green, the principal. They dreaded how Mr.